And he also let him know how disastrous the porn industry was. And it's indeed, through the production process, is absolutely sexual abuse of women. And so helping his son understand that what's presented in one way, the reality is quite different. Welcome to the Faithful Fathering Podcast. Thank you for joining us. And this is Rick Wertz, founder and president of Faithful Fathering, where our mission is to encourage and equip dads to be faithful fathers. Those are, by definition, a faithful father prioritizes his physical presence, is engaged emotionally, and leads spiritually by example, reflecting the triune nature of God in his home. It's also the vision is to engage dads in raising a godly generation and reinvigorate the church on the fathering front. So this podcast series is continuing our effort to talk through the seasons of fathering, but this is going to be coaching through the teen years. We'll have 3 in this series, but it's the first of a series of 3, and in discussing a dad's role as coach through the teen years. A quick refresher, if you're tuning in for the first time, we're walking through the seasons of fathering and talking about specific challenges that go with each season. Earlier podcasts addressed the teacher season of fathering, the first 10 years of a child's life, where kids can trust dad and mom completely. They actually think we're gods, Richard. But and it's also the time when faith and family values are instilled in a child. In future podcasts, we'll walk through what I call the counselor season of fathering, when kids are grown in their 20s and beyond. I'm in the counselor season presently, and I think it's one of the toughest seasons because it arrives in what seems to be the blink of an eye. Just yesterday, I was teaching my own son to throw a ball in the backyard, and last weekend I watched him exchange vows with the love of his life. It's the message to younger dads is to slow down, enjoy time with your children the Lord's blessed you with, and embrace fully each season of fathering as we move through. So in the studio with me today to talk about coaching kids through teen years is a very special guest, Richard Vega. He's a veteran, an Army veteran, and presently leader of At His Feet Ministries. Richard is also a husband and a father of 7. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Richard, welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself and your ministry.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on. Like you said, I have 7 kids, so a little bit of seasoned in fatherhood, and boys and girls in all ages, ranging from 24 down to 8 years old. So I know how it is to get into those teen years. Let's just say that. But at His Feet Ministries, we do whatever we can to walk with people and get them to the feet of Jesus and let Jesus do what he's great at. And, we just love plugging in and helping change lives and doing whatever we can. Again, like I said, just to walk with people and show them that there's a different way and a better way.
Well, build on that a little bit. You mentioned Harvey was one of the kickoffs for your ministry when you really stepped in. Tell us a little bit about how you were at his feet through that time.
Yeah, so at His Feet, we had just pretty much formed a 501c3 and got our team, and we were ready to roll. And Harvey came in to introduce us to real labor. And hey, it was great. In the first 11 days, we were able to get into the community and really meet a lot of partners. We fed a little over 33,000 people at our spot within the first 11 days, which was amazing. And that just tapped into more things. And last year during the pandemic, in the first 5 months, we fed over 60,000 people, just with other partners, great women and men of God teaming up and saying, hey, we got this. What can you do? So let's get it out to the people. And in that process, we were able to pray with tens of thousands of people that were hurting during that time. As you know, our world went through a fear season, and a lot of people coming through those car lines that needed food. Right? A lot of children, their only meals is at school. Mm-hmm. And, it's sad, but it's a reality of our society that some parents decide to sell food stamps and other things, and these kids don't have no food. And so that was really what God put on my heart when when the shutdown came was these schools, these kids, these babies that their only meal is at school.
Right.
So praise God that He opened up a lot of doors for us to be able to operate.
Well, that's the beauty of the hands and feet of Jesus, our various ministries, and of course, one of our primary ministries is as a dad, isn't it? That we can equip our children to navigate through this world and all the curveballs. It is a fallen world. We're reminded of that
Yes, yes.
too often, as a matter of fact, right? But as we, you said you're teaching, and I found the teen years myself as fabulous window of time. As we see these young people start to become young adults and make their decisions and stand and fall and then coach them through those successes as well as the failures. One area that I've seen as particularly challenging with young men and actually young women as well today is what I call fatal attractions. I remember when one dad, his teenage son, he caught his teenage son and realized that he had been viewing pornography for a while on his phone. And as he approached and confronted his son about this, the son got a little defensive, saying, "Well, everybody watches this stuff," and actually just a couple of buddies were really pressuring him to view it and send him a few links. That's all it was, or just a few links.
Yeah.
And his dad, realized real quick it didn't do a whole lot of good to get angry with him, did it? Have you had that kind of experience with one of your teenagers?
A couple of them. Yes, I have, and I tell you, that's always a challenging moment because it's never, the story that you made. It was never me finding out. It was my wife that found out first, and so it's always tough period when you find something out like that, And how do you address it? How do you approach it? What are you gonna say?
Right.
And
I like, women have this radar, don't they? One pastor I know referenced it that women have this radar.
Oh, yeah.
They're aware of everything
They
that's going
know.
on, and us men, we have a gut feeling
Yeah.
that if there's something wrong, we need to chase down that gut feeling and get in. But we got to be tuned into our wife because she's got that that feelers out to see exactly what's going on. So how about yourself and did you have a time like that in your own life where you had to address, or your dad confronted you with pornography?
For me, I did watch some, but I was always I didn't really, it wasn't appealing to myself, and so, but I did watch, friends in junior high would give me tapes, or we didn't have links back then.
Right.
We had VHS cassette tapes, and you watch them. All the guys are watching them and passing around things, and but it was never something that I really, and for myself, and not even being saved, I just didn't really see the point of really watching it. It wasn't for me. But my boys, it was two of them had gone through some challenges like that, and each child is different, and how you approach them and how they learn, or how they are they going to be receptive to the things you say? Because like you said, getting mad, a child will shut down really quick. First they're defensive, and then they want to lie about everything, and then are you want your child to shut down on you, or you want them to be open?
Well said. And that's what this dad did. He really kind of turned to a friend for some advice and learned very quickly how rampant pornography is, and even in middle school and high school. In fact, I think that he learned that the average first-time exposure, the average age, is actually 9 years old.
Wow.
So he realized as a teenager, it probably wasn't the first time that he'd looked at pornography and been caught up in it.
Right.
But the idea that there was pressure on him, and it woke him up from the slumbers of thinking, when he was a kid, it was more about magazines as much as anything else. But now it's in your face constantly. What are your thoughts on the way pornography has just infiltrated, whether it be the video games? They're almost aggressively going after these young kids. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're 100% right. They're going after our children. It's a demonic spirit that has plagued our country for years. It's a $1 billion industry that taps into human trafficking. So it's definitely something that we need to address within the fatherhood and the churches. We can't run or hide from it no more. We got to be more responsible as parents. They have, and I'm not sure, I didn't, but they have links. So when we deal with it within our church, when I'm discipling men, those that struggle with pornography, there's apps out there that we can put on your laptop and your phone. And so generally what I tell the guys is, okay, we're going to put this app on there. You got to pay for it. And what he'll do is he'll text me or email me and let me know you're trying to get on these certain sites. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, I don't know if I want you in my business. I say, you know what? You're right. Let's send it to your wife's phone and her email. then they start backpedaling a little bit. But we can do that for our own kids, mm-hmm. Especially if they have phones or, you're allowing them to get on laptops and things like that. Putting these things in there and watching their video games, because you're right. I mean, video games are every bit of just rated X on some of these things. And it's we got to wake up. It's no more, here you go, you can go play a video game. It's so innocent now. You really got to watch what you're doing with your kids.
They're absolutely aggressively coming after, whether it's any kind of electronic stimulation, via video games or what have you. They're aggressively going after our kids. And so dad's chance is to stand firm and stand in the gap there. And like you say, there are apps to step in and be engaged with your son, see what's going on. But then there's ways around them as well. I remember one guy was looking to set something up in a home, and as he was doing it, a 10-year-old was writing code around the protection that he was putting in.
Oh, wow.
And it just, these kids are just so sharp. There's ways around this stuff. So what I always say is, we got to go back to the word, which is 2 Corinthians 10:5 says, we demolish all arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, that we would take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. Right. And that's a challenge. As we, Paul's charge to the early church in Corinth was not to live by the standards of this world, but to be different, right? And while we're to be in the world, we're not to be of the world. And so if pornography established itself as a standard for this world, for young people, sex is regarded as an act, not as a relational intimacy that we're called to. And a fatal attraction to pornography is indeed fatal to that relational intimacy the Lord calls us to, which I think is really the devil's scheme, isn't it? Is to wipe out that level of relationship that he calls us. So the argument that sex is okay outside of marriage and the pretension that relational intimacy is not sacrificed as a result are certainly contrary to the knowledge of God, and that's what we have to watch out for, is to be sure to blast through these secular views of what sex is. So how did you push back against that for your sons?
Well, the one thing is for us, my brother-in-law, he's a computer wizard, so we were able to, know the time and what device and all that stuff, and so just letting them know that, number one, your sin will find you out, right? But more so, the Father wants you to be able to find this now, and let's get it rooted out, right? And so the verse that you use, or the scripture you use, 2 Corinthians 10, verse 5, I think it is, but it's that's one of the ones I use, right? And so it says, capture every thought and hold it captive. And I just literally just went through this with my youngest son, and just telling him, these thoughts that we have, it doesn't say we're not going to have them, but it says that we're supposed to, capture them. And think about somebody getting arrested, right? They get placed in handcuffs and they get placed in a car, and then we hold them until either we decide what we're going to do with it. Are we going to leave them in jail, or are we going to release them? And so we got to be able to hold these thoughts and say, okay, we're not going to allow this to leave our lips, or we're not going to make it become an action. So what we do from there is place it under the blood of Jesus and say, you don't have the right to be in my mind. You don't have the right to be here, and start releasing it. And then what I do is I walk with them through Galatians 5. And we talk about the fruit of the spirits, right? And so and also in Revelations 21, and I compare both of them because I want them to see sin and I want them to see the fruit of the Spirit. But what we find in both of those, in Galatians 5 and in Revelations, that it all comes down to self-control. And so the fruit of the Spirit, one of them is self-control.
Sure.
And then also right before, when he talks about sin in Galatians 5, a lot of it is sexual immorality, impurities, the lustful nature of our flesh, and how Revelations 12, he says that we'll have a part in lake of fire. So what I try to tell my kids are, okay, so, we want you to carry the oils of joy and happiness and gladness and all these things, but let's start with self-control. Because if we can start with self-control, and what is self-control? Acknowledging that we have this thought, but not acting on it and placing it under the blood of Jesus, that we can win. When I was in the military, there was days that, we didn't think we'd get through a certain particular training, but I would tell myself, if I can just make it to lunch, or if I can make it to breakfast, and if I make it to breakfast, then all I got to do is make it to lunch, and I've conquered half that day. And then let me just make it to dinner, and then let me just make it till I get to sleep. Well, before you know it, you've already broken down your day, and you've accomplished the whole day.
There you go.
And each day, just taking day by day, having them build that in their mind that they're able to overcome this addiction or overcome what is satisfying the flesh, because it is a battle for a lot of men, and it like you were saying, 9 years old. So imagine that. I mean, they get trapped into this fleshly desire that releases these endorphins into their mind. It becomes an addiction, just like a normal drug addiction, and they yearn for this high. And by the time they're 30 years old or 25, they're getting married, and maybe their wife isn't never been exposed to that stuff and trying to figure out, what are you trying to get me to do? What are you doing? Now you're causing marriage conflicts. Sure. And then it comes, I even heard of guys not even being able to perform or do things because they're so used to this.
That's usually what pulls a man out of pornography addiction is erectile dysfunction, and that's the reality of the deal. And that's where I always want to make sure the pretension that's there is that these things are real. It's not fantasy. So to let a child know exactly what's going on, and the touch up and the makeup and the all the things that enhance the fantasy that you're in, and to help a young man understand that is fantasy, that's not reality in a relationship. And that's the way you blast through some of the devil's scheme, is that the knowledge of God is that he built man for woman, but that is a physical and an emotional relationship and a spiritual relationship at the end of the day in marriage. And that's the next passage I like in Hebrews 13. It says, marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept pure, for God will judge the adulterer and the sexually immoral, because that's adultery, is even the thinking the lustful thoughts, was what Jesus laid out there. It's what we think, not necessarily what we do. So marriage is the primary means to experience the relational intimacy our Father desires for us. And the world offers other choices, what I call fatal attractions, that fall well short of God's desire for man. And so that idea that marriage is the closest thing to our relationship with Christ in the flesh, and how we honor that and live into that is key. So are kids growing up with an understanding of relational intimacy? I mean, how do you reflect that in your home?
Well, in our home, I never really knew my father, and my mom was just, she was a hardworking mom, and she worked all the time. So I really didn't understand what a good home looks like until I met my beautiful wife, and she's trained me well. And
good news is God's not done with us yet. Right?
Yeah, that's right. So, making sure that we're hugging and kissing our children, and showing men and women that, I hold my wife's hand. I make sure she's with me. I acknowledge her when I'm coming through the door, not just walking through the door and walking past her or even my children. We say hi to everybody, acknowledge everybody when we're in the room, in those type of ways, and really teaching these young men how to be husbands and how to honor your wife in those ways, and making sure, and and going the extra mile, getting the gas, and showing that, there's different ways of intimacy versus just kissing or sex, right? We can take this thing called love and make it really deep. My wife drives further than I do to work, and so I don't want her to have to stop on the way home or on the way to work. I want her to come straight home when she gets off of work, not worrying about having to go get gas or any of these other things. So one of the things I like to do is I'll get my son and be like, okay, hey, let's go fill up mom's car, and we go get her gas.
Sure.
Just showing them little things that we can improve in the relationship.
Right. Well, that's very powerful. I think that's the key a lot of times is to make sure we're reflecting that. That there is. I do want a chance to push a book. There's a friend of mine took this book on is raising your son and preparing him for every man's battle. That's one of the books out there. I don't have the author's name off the top of my head, but he wrote the book for every man's battle. But then he said every young man's battle, and then there's preparing your son for every man's battle. And that opened up the dialogue, even with a young boy like 9, 10 years old when your first exposure. It opens the door to talk about sexual intimacy as well as just intimacy in a relationship. And so I encourage dads to start early. Don't let the teen years sneak up on you, but start early in those dialogues. And that's in fact when the dad ended up sitting down with his son to discuss God's desire for relational intimacy, the young man that had been caught viewing pornography, he started off affirming his son. That's the number one thing. He didn't get angry with him. He affirmed him that, essentially that's what Adam said when he told God, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. He said, God, you did good work here. A woman is beautiful, and the intimacy that we desire to have is a natural occurrence, but it needs to be controlled until it's time to consummate a marriage, right? Mm-hmm. And so he also let him know how disastrous the porn industry was, and it's indeed through the production process is absolutely sexual abuse of women. And so helping his son understand that what's presented in one way, the reality is quite different. Yes. And as you said, it opens the door for all kinds of sex trafficking and what have you. So there's nothing good that comes out of a perversion of relational intimacy. That's right. And so I thought that dialogue was really good because it explained how the visual stimulation really distracts from the reality of what God meant by design. The devil's scheme to destroy marriage and any level of relational intimacy really points, relational intimacy that absolutely points to the Father, because he wants to destroy the Father. He wants to destroy marriage relationships. So, I always think of the armor of God. And any thoughts you have on the devil's scheme to destroy relational intimacy? Any thoughts or further comments you have?
Yeah, since the beginning of time, when God, when I teach a marriage class, I always tell them, the man was taken from the dust of the ground, and women was made from man. We're separated for a reason, right? And Satan knows that, but he knows that it wasn't good for man to be alone. And like you said, for the intimacy of marriage, God created the marriage and for the love. So Satan to come in and he knew exactly what he was doing, to basically pervert the relationship, the intimacy part of man and woman. And to think that, you can just go out and have sex with all these different people and not have punishment when God had already written what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to operate and the blessings that come to attach to being obedient. We won't even go down that road yet. But I think a lot of fathers out there that are listening, just do some research on what it does to your brain. And do you want that for your son? Do you want that for your daughter? Because, for us to say silent, and the truth of the matter is, I'm guilty. I didn't even have these conversations with my sons until they got caught. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So why are we waiting that long? Let's take the initiative, right, and say, okay, and both of my boys were in junior high at that time. So I probably should have started at 6th grade or 5th grade and started having these conversations. Mm-hmm. And it's important for us as men to say, okay, this is our household. We're going to have to lead them because this is a reality, especially if they're going to public schools in a larger city. Like you said, it's all around, and these links are so easily shared, and it's there, it's available for them. Even though you don't watch in your home and you raised them well, the enemy is the enemy. And he comes to kill, steal, and destroy.
Indeed, indeed. Well said, Richard. I appreciate your time being here. I know dads will benefit from the insight that's gleaned here, and that will coach our kids through those fatal attractions. I just want to encourage dads out there that when kids get caught up, there are opportunities to stand in the gap, and you can turn anything around to God's glory.
That's right.
So the key, as we've discussed here, is not get angry, affirm the right attraction, and then encourage discipline as we move forward. So that's by keeping a home a very safe place for discussing any topic at any time. Dads, that's what we have to always be approachable and be real with our kids. And so I charge every dad, may your marriage relationship reflect that relational intimacy that God calls us to, and just that's the dad you're called to be, and that's the dad the next generation needs. Thanks for being with us, Richard, and God bless and Godspeed.
Thank you.